Eric. Next, we are going to present this year's OSG David Swanson Awardee. So a quick note about the OSG David Swanson Award. It is our most prestigious award given once a year in memory of David Swanson, longtime friend and collaborator of the OSG Consortium. We're going to have some folks share a little bit about David and his impact in our group. But the award goes to someone who attended the OSG School and has gone on to do cool and interesting things. So with that, I will turn things over to Ken Bloom to share a little bit about David.
Okay, thanks. This is great. You introduce the person who's going to introduce the person who's going to introduce the person. So we have it all covered. I'm Ken Bloom. I'm on the faculty of the University of Nebraska, and I am on the OSG Council representing the Holland Computing Center. I'm a former chair of the council. And every year I get to do this, so I appreciate this opportunity. Since apparently nostalgia is the theme for the day, if we go back 20 years ago, that was my first year at Nebraska, and 20 years ago, January, we received notice that we would be a tier 2 computing site for USCMS. A big milestone at the start of my career, and that was a proposal that we made along with David, who was the leader of research computing facility on our campus at the time, and we recognized that there was a physics component to this, there was a big computing component to this, and that's why we made sure that David was actually the lead person on it, and so we became one of the founding sites, I guess, of what was called Open Science Grid and is now OSG. And David helped build us into being a key player in OSG and a leader, a contributor in many of the aspects of OSG operations. And what I always admired for David for, besides getting us organizationally involved in that, was really his eye for talent and the people he recruited and mentored, including certainly among them people in this room, Brian Bockelman, Derek Weitzel, and so what he's been able to do with that has really lived on beyond, well, certainly past David's death in a car crash in 2019. And so we're glad to be able to keep remembering him and keep pushing forward the sort of things that he was interested in and supportive of. I don't want to take too long now, so I'm happy to welcome David's wife Rhonda, his daughter Sophia, who we're always happy to keep as part of our Open Science Grid OSG family. So I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Ken. So I just have a raise of hands of anybody who actually met David. Oh, a lot of you. Okay. Well, I think that, when we're talking about in memory of someone, a lot of times it doesn't mean a lot to us emotionally because we maybe don't know that person, but there are a lot of you. I love hearing a lot of all the science talk, even though I'm a registered nurse, so I have some biological background, but it's so, the words and the sounds, the voices are so familiar. It just makes us feel good. So, okay. This is Sophia, and David and I have 4 children, Caleb, Abigail, Sophia, and then Livia. And she decided to come with me this time, and I'm really grateful. The David Swanson Award was started by his OSG colleagues in 2020 after he was killed in August of 2019. I believe Dave's abilities in science, administration, and patient leadership made him well suited for the Holland Computing Center and for OSG. But I think his personal loyalty to you and deep care for you is what made him special and why you want to honor him and a particular student with this award. Sorry, this is so dumb. Attending his employees' weddings, visiting them in the hospital when they had babies, barbecues, holiday celebrations in our home, and the almost constant conversations that were being had by email and text. I'm telling you, middle school girls have nothing on these people. He lived it. He loved it when they brought their kids to trick or treat at our house. And on one Halloween, I heard him say, he's handing out candy, not like, here's one for you, here's one. He's like pouring into their little buckets, all the candy. And I was like, okay. He said, Rhonda, do we have any ice cream in the house? And I said, well, yeah, we do. He goes, well, come in, let's all have ice cream. I'm thinking it's Halloween, but I think it was a good idea of what he might have been like as a grandpa. But so we all, anyway, we all continue to walk forward without Dave present. And I want to encourage all of us to emulate attention to the deep work details like this gentleman presented today. I just thought that was fascinating. And we want to attend to one another as we are trying to finish well. So on behalf of the OSG, myself, Caleb, Abigail, Sophia, and Livia, I'd like to present the 2025 David Swanson Award to Brandi Pessman, and she'll come down in just a minute, but I want to make sure I said her name right away. So this year's OSG David Swanson Award recipient is Brandi Pessman. Should we have her come down? Yeah, why don't you come down? From the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. Dave used to say the University of Nebraska-Lincoln is the best bang for your buck in the middle of the United States now. Whether that's actually true, I don't know, but he thought so. So Brandi attended the OSG School in 2023, and she is eager to expand her research toolkit. As a graduate student at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, she studied how spiders respond to rising noise levels in cities. Did you know there was going to be information about Spider-Man coming up? Okay. Focusing on their potential ability to control the properties of their webs. With her new knowledge of HTC, Brandi digitally reconstructed spider webs using machine learning to track the movement of spiders during web construction. She is also passionate about empowering others to use these computational tools to process video documentation of animal behavior and beyond. So with that, actually, I would just love to present this to you, and may I give you a hug? Okay. Congratulations. Thanks for letting us come and do this each year when we actually can get away from our jobs. We appreciate you so very much.
Okay, can everyone hear me okay? Amazing. So yes, thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here today and talk to you about some of the research that I've accomplished using the high throughput computing. And so I'm currently a postdoc at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. And before I move forward, I really want to give a huge thank you for all of the people who really made this research possible. These are a lot of the people that I worked with directly with the OSG group, where I brought these really challenging research questions that they helped me address. And I never had the privilege of meeting David, but I'm really honored to be here today in his memory. And so the really difficult research question that I brought is, does noise affect how spiders are constructing their webs? And I'm going to talk a whole bunch about how spiders are constructing their webs. But before I get too much further, I want to hit on this concept of noise. So I grew up on this farm in rural Illinois, not too far from here. And it was a really peaceful place that when I moved to the suburbs of Chicago to attend college, I found out that cities can be really noisy environments with our traffic and our construction and our airplane noise. And while I was there, I was researching crickets and their behaviors. And so I was really diving deep into the cricket literature. And it was around this time when a lot of really big papers were coming out about how road noise is affecting crickets. And I thought, me too, crickets. And the more I dug, the more I realized that noise is impacting animals and many of the senses that we share with them. It's affecting their hearing, their sight, and their smell. And these are actually pretty well represented in the literature. What's missing from the literature, though, are senses that we don't necessarily share with animals. And these kind of are hidden from our own senses. And the one that I want to highlight today is this idea of vibrations. And yes, we can feel vibrations. You know, when we put our phone on vibrate and we get a phone call, we can feel that. But it's not a main source of information that we're using to understand our world. And just as the vibration sense itself is kind of hidden from us, a lot of the animals that are using vibrations are hidden from our view. And that's because the animals that are using vibratory information are small, like insects and spiders and other invertebrates. But despite being small, we know they're playing a really essential role in our environment. Some of them are pollinators, some of them are decomposers, and some even control our pests. So just a little bit of a fast forward, I found myself attending grad school at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. And I entered a lab that is using spiders and arachnids to address behavior. And so fair warning, there's some spider images and videos coming up, so I hope everyone is cool with that. But I wanted to point out my building here at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. You might notice that it's right next to our massive football stadium. And there's all kinds of really big roads and highways and interstates nearby. And you can even see the downtown Capitol area just off in the distance. And so this lends itself to being a really, really noisy environment. But what's really cool, if you step outside the door of this building, you'll find this one particular spider. This spider is called a funnel weaving spider. And they are really well named because they construct webs that, in a sense, look like funnels. So their webs, which you can see on a bush here, consist of a sheet. This is typically where prey is falling on or walking across their web and producing vibrations. And the spider is often sitting in the retreat. And this is where it's monitoring those vibrations so that it can respond when it senses them. And so I wanted to hit a little bit more on exactly how spiders are sensing their prey. So when a prey like this fly here gets tangled in its web, as it's moving around, it's producing vibrations that the spider then can use to detect, identify, and locate that prey. So this is a video here that I wanted to show you of me just dropping a cricket on a spider's web, where I can show you kind of how they use those vibrations. So you'll notice when the cricket's moving, the spider can easily get closer and closer to it to try and locate it. But as soon as that cricket stops moving, that spider pauses, turns in different directions, and is trying to gather that information that's no longer there. Another way that spiders are using vibrations are to communicate with one another. So in this video here, there's a male in the foreground that's communicating to a female in the background. And you'll see the female even respond as the male is courting. And this one has some audio, which I hope will come through. And what this has done is we use a machine to record the vibrations, and it changes those vibrations into a sound that we can more easily hear. So that's what you'll be hearing. So a little shaky, but yeah, so the male's bobbing its abdomen and moving its legs and just shaking that web to tell the female that he's good stuff. And so we know vibrations are super important for these spiders, both for them to detect their prey and to communicate with mates. But when the spider is building really close to heavily traveled roads, as cars are driving on those roads, those tires are creating friction on the ground, which is introducing vibrations. And those can transmit across the ground and onto the web, where they have the potential to interfere with those vibrations that the spider is using. But because the spiders are the constructors of their own web, I've had a hypothesis that they can actually use their webs and modify them in some way to decrease the effects of noise to better hear the information that they're trying to receive from their webs. And so I was like, okay, the first obvious place to look is maybe they're changing the structures of their webs. So the more I looked across Lincoln, and Lincoln quickly turns into rural area, which you can see the white dash lines are Lincoln city limits, and everything in orange is urban area, and everything in green is rural. And across both these habitats, you can find these spiders everywhere. So we collected spiders from both of these habitats. And we did a separate study where we actually recorded noise differences across these different habitats. And we learned that they can differ by up to 20 decibels. And that might be hard to think about because we don't often think in decibels. But as a comparison, you can think of the rural environments as being a quiet library, and the urban environments as someone vacuuming right next to you. So these can be some pretty different noise environments. And so we collected spiders from these two different habitats and we brought them into the lab. And we wanted to manipulate their vibratory environment while they're constructing their webs. So to do this, we crafted these arenas with super high-tech material. We used some photography velvet and an embroidering loop that we got off of Amazon. And we attached these vials inside where the spider could build that retreat that it likes to build so much. And we put these arenas on top of a modified speaker. And these speakers were what were producing the vibrations that traveled to the arena through a wooden scaffold. We produced two different playback treatments, a quiet one and a loud one. And these reflected what we had recorded in the field. And we took spiders from the two different habitats and put them into the two different treatments so that we had 4 different combinations: an urban loud, urban quiet, rural loud, and rural quiet. Now these webs, as you might have noticed, are pretty complex. And you can compare that to this web that I threw up here that's a little more structured and might lend itself a little easier to being physically measured if we had the real web in front of us. But because these webs are so complex, I decided a more appropriate way to measure their structure is to actually video record the spider while it's constructing its web. And I thought this was brilliant. But then I found out, because no one had known, that these spiders build exclusively at night. So I needed to record all of these videos using infrared light. Not too much of a problem. But they also don't constrain their web building to a particular part of the night. They will build any time that is dark. So 12 hours long of building. So we did it anyway. We're like, okay, I'm just gonna go for it. We're gonna record 12 hours of video in the night for 4 nights while these spiders are constructing their webs. And then I came up with this brilliant plan that I'm like, we're gonna use a machine learning software called Deep Lab Cut. And I'm gonna have some brilliant people who are here in the audience today help me build a container of this software. And I'm going to train this software to track a spider. Here's an example of what those videos looked like with the infrared. And I know this is a terrible color combination, but there is a purple dot on the spider down here against the purple background. Too late to change it now. But you'll see that the machine learning software can learn to track the spider as it moves around. And if we assume that the spider is laying silk every time that it's moving, which matches our observations, then we can use this video to digitally reconstruct a spider web. And then we can make more fine-tuned measurements on these webs. This was my dream. But because we were recording for so long, I found myself with 20 terabytes of video data and 4,278 half-hour clips of these spiders moving. I wasn't ready to touch that. So I'm like, okay, let's try something that at first thought I thought was going to be a little more difficult, but actually lended itself to be pretty straightforward. I'm like, I'm going to measure the transmission of the vibrations on the web to see if they differ between these environments. And so vibrations will lose energy as they travel through a surface. And so wherever we apply a vibration on the web, it's always going to lose energy to the point where we measure it. But we can see if spiders in different treatment groups lose energy in those vibrations in different ways. And so I took these 4 treatments, urban loud, urban quiet, rural quiet, and applied vibrations close to the opening of the retreat, because that, again, is where the spider's always monitoring for vibrations. And so we started with some close applications of vibrations and looked at different frequencies and how the webs were losing energy as those vibrations traveled. And I want to point out the urban loud treatment in particular, because it differed from all the other treatments. The urban loud spiders seem to be losing additional energy as the vibrations traveled across their webs. And we can think of this as the spider kind of cranking the volume way down on the webs. These webs were coming across as much quieter. And when we applied vibrations further from the spider, so they had further to travel across the web, we actually saw a different result, where rural spiders in loud environments seem to be retaining some of the energy in those vibrations. In essence, kind of turning the volume up just a little bit on their webs. And so I'm like, okay, this is amazing. The spiders seem to be tuning their webs to their environment. But how are they doing that? I was right back to web structure. It's unavoidable at this point. There's differences, and now we have some motivation to push us forward to kind of ask this question. And so I was like, okay, let's just try running this machine learning software on my desktop computer. As I'm sure many of you might have experienced, my computer crashed. So not really an option. I was like, okay. I started to hear things about the Holland Computing Center because I had never heard of it up until this point. And I'm like, let's try and run some machine learning with some high performance computing. Well, I had 4,278 video clips. And I thought maybe I could combine those and make just a 12-hour video that it can track. Well, I tried that and I was hitting wall times, and it just felt like I just hitting these dead ends. And that's when I found out about the OSG User School. And I came to them with this really weird question of, okay, I want to track spiders as they're constructing their webs. And so for each of our spiders, there were a total of 46. A 12-hour video was split up into 31 individual video clips throughout that night. And I pulled 30 frames from each of these spiders that I myself labeled like I did in this picture here. And this was meant to create a training data set that we could train a model on so that a computer could learn how to identify where the spider is and track the rest of the video. So we trained this model using OSG resources, but where they really became important was now I could send these 31 video clips to 31 different computers at the same time and get the positions of the spider throughout an entire video. So it would take inputs from this trained model, and I would get in return a CSV where each row is a frame with an XY coordinate of where the spider was in that frame. I could then add up all the individual clips and get one CSV for a whole 12 hours of a spider moving around its web. And so what that can look like, we can graph the X and Y coordinates, which will show up as pink and green on this graph. And across all, I think there was 1.3 million frames in a 12-hour video. And when we graph that, what we see is some areas where the lines show up flat. And these are times when the spider is not moving because the X and Y coordinates are not changing. But these times that we start to see vertical movement is when the spider is actually moving around its arena. So we can write some for loops and some run length encoding where we actually identify these places where the spider is moving. Once we accomplish that, we can take out these times of rest. And now I just have XY coordinates of every frame where the spider is moving. And we can finally create our beautiful digital reconstructions of webs. And now we can do some really cool measurements that I'm even just now starting to poke at. And so some of the things that I want to show you today, just a a little taste of what I've been doing is looking at spatial silk use. We can even look at how fast the spider was moving as it was laying its silk. And we can look at move and rest dynamics. And I wanted to show you this because I think it's just amazing. After just one night of web building, we can see some crazy differences in spiders' behavior as they're constructing their web. As you can see by the web on the bottom, this spider moved a lot more throughout the night and actually created a web that was thicker and fuller after just one night. So to have a look at the spatial silk use, we can divide the web up to 1 centimeter squared bins with making sure that the retreat is at the top. We can then remove all of the squares that either don't contain parts of the web, or you might notice that the areas around the outside are pretty thick. The spiders do like to stay along the edge of the web. And so I took those parts out. Although I will say when I ran these analysis with this included, it was the exact same results. So we can look at these remaining squares and count the number of frames where the spider was identified as being in that square. And what this gives us is the mean number of frames where the darker the color is, the more purple, the more silk is in that area of the web. And we can compare this for our 4 different treatment groups: the urban loud, urban quiet, rural loud, and rural quiet, with their sample sizes in parentheses next to them. And what we find is that for 3 of the treatments, their webs are pretty similar. They're using similar amounts of silk, maybe save for adding a little more silk around the outside, but they're pretty similar. The really cool part is when we look at the urban loud spiders. These spiders are using a lot more silk. And they seem to be using a lot more silk, particularly around the retreat. And this is where we were providing those really close vibrations from this figure here. So the urban loud spiders might be adding more silk, and this might be what's responsible for the turning the volume down on their web. So more silk might just make it a little quieter for them. We can also look at things, as I mentioned, about the average speed that the spider was moving and the average move length, so the amount of time before the spider took a rest. And for this analysis, I included playback treatment, so quiet or loud, and where the spider was collected, rural or urban, as an interaction in the model. And what we actually find is that there is an effective treatment and treatment only, where spiders from the loud treatment are moving significantly slower, and they're also moving for longer amounts of time before taking a rest compared to spiders in the quiet treatment. And while we're not exactly sure yet how these might be contributing to the vibration transmission that we measured, because these were measured on different webs, these might add up to maybe explaining why the rural loud spiders might be turning their volume up a little. But more to come on this. So what seemed like it was becoming an impossible question of how is noise affecting how spiders are constructing their webs actually turned into this really cool answer that I'm just touching the tip of the iceberg on. That spiders seem to be combating the effects of noise by changing their silk laying behavior, which is translating into differences in how the webs are carrying vibrations across them. And so there's a lot of ways that we can push this research forward. This was just the first night of web building. So I have one more night of web building videos to look at. And I also, on the 3rd night, I switched the treatments so that spiders on the quiet treatment got switched to the loud and vice versa. And so I can look at how a different noise environment might change their behavior, even in the middle of web construction. I also want to look at different web building stages. So in a lot of spiders, we know that they go through certain stages in how they construct their webs. And so maybe they're constructing their webs differently when they're in different noise environments. And I think it'd be really cool to build some mathematical my goodness, mathematical models where we can actually connect how spiders are changing the structures of the web to those vibration transmissions and actually be able to predict that. And so with that, there are so many people to acknowledge and so many funding sources. And I want to point out my committee members who helped me graduate a year ago. So shout out to them, and past and present members of our lab, and additional sources of support. And of course, my cat and dog. Feel free to come and talk to me about your pets. I love talking pets. And I also would like to put in a plug. I am actively looking for data science positions. So if you or anyone you know is looking for a data scientist, feel free to connect with me by these means or anytime during the conference. And I'm happy to take any questions. Yeah.
We want the, yeah.
It's a fun question, maybe. You are studying like how the noise level is affecting the spider web or their web constructions. So did you ever think or studied about spider renovating their web? Because their web might be affected by the noise as like on a continuous basis. There might be some structural instability in their web. So are they also renovating like we renovate our houses?
Yeah, that's a great question. So these spiders do build semi-permanent webs. And so there are some spiders who will tear down their webs every day and reconstruct them, but that's not this spider. They'll continue to build as long as there's no damage to their webs. If there's a lot of disturbance, sometimes they'll move locations entirely. But because they're always working on their webs, they're going to be constantly modifying it, which is one of the reasons why I switched the treatments, because I really wanted to know mid-construction, can they switch what they're doing to account for changes in their environment? And so stay tuned for that answer. I'm still working on, but I'm sure that they're changing as their environment is influencing them.
Oh, thank you, Brandi, for the wonderful presentation. And I'm glad that Rachel's not here, so she didn't freak out with the spiders. So when you were presenting, I was actually like the end of the slide, you had the mathematical model, and it looked like the spiders are building, their waves are thicker when near the noise areas or when you were where the sounds are mostly propagating through. So it's looks like it's mostly, yeah, like it's adding mass to that, so dampen the vibration. So my background is vibration on ultrasound side. So just one suggestion is like if you stay as a postdoc or if you want to dig more, you may collaborate with someone on the mechanical engineering side of thing to do the modeling side. And also the other question that I have was like, what's your ultimate or what's your PI's ultimate goal in terms of just to know the science behind the movement, or is there some, what should I say, like agricultural impact or like other impacts to that as well? Thank you.
Yeah, so that's a great question. And one reason that I love talking about this and getting it out there is spiders are often overlooked. One, because they're small. Two, because humans aren't always a fan of spiders. And so but these spiders and other animals that are using vibrations are so important to our environment. And too often we see that these animals are just not found in cities anymore. And so one reason I like researching these, an animal that has done really, really well in a city, is try and figure out how they're able to make it work so we can better understand why other animals haven't been able to make it work. And to come at it from a more materials perspective too, we still have not figured out how spiders make silk the way they do. It is an incredible material that we haven't quite figured out yet. And so I think the more that we dive into how they're able to do these things with a material we can't even figure out will just help us in that process. But yes, I do want to collaborate and find out more about how mass is affecting vibration transmission.
All right, let's thank Brandi one more time.